Welcome to Jason's Jewels. I'm your host, Jason Alexander. And today, we just going to jump right into it. Last night in the Final Four, we had Florida versus Auburn. Florida emerged victorious in a game that Auburn had the lead at halftime. But at the end of the day, they just couldn't close it out against a good Florida team. Walter Clayton Jr. That is the man. He's been the best player in the tournament so far. And I think he had 32, something like that. I know he had over 30 points again last night for a second 30-point game in the tournament. So Florida is where they were expected to be in the national championship game. You know, if it weren't for the antics and the actions of the second game, I'd spend a little bit more time talking about that Florida-Auburn game because truthfully, that was a pretty good game. It was a good game to watch. It was a highly contested game throughout. We had a battle of two teams that were high-quality teams, two one seeds, which is exactly what I was hoping for, was a battle of the one seeds in the Final Four. So, you know, we had a good game with Florida and Auburn, and like I said, Florida emerged victorious. Auburn played great. Bruce Pearl came close, couldn't get it done once again, but, you know, it's going to be what it's going to be. Congratulations to Florida, and we will see you on Monday evening in the championship game. Now, on to the shocker of the night. And I call it the shocker of the night because of how that game ended. And you know, anybody who's been following my show, watching my show, seeing my clips knows I am a Duke fan. Been a Duke fan since 1992. Ever since Christian Laettner hit the shot that pretty much damaged all the psyche of an entire state for decades. You know what I'm saying? I've been a Duke fan since then. I hopped on that wagon, 1992, March 28th. So there ain't no shame in my game. I'm going to tell you how it is. So last night, Duke losing to the Houston Cougars in the Final Four, the way they lost that game is probably going to be a top 3 disappointing Duke Blue Devil basketball moment for me. Now, doesn't exactly top 2002. 2002 hurt a lot worse than this. And that's just a fact. I was emotionally invested in that team. Jay Will was my dude, my favorite Dookie. Always has been, always will be. You know, 2002, that was a brutal, epic loss. And as you can see, I'm still scarred by that loss to this day. Now, this loss that they had last night against Houston is definitely up there, but this loss doesn't scar me the way the one in 2002 scarred me. And I guess the reasoning for that is as I've gotten older, I guess I've become less emotionally invested in these teams. Kind of hard to put a finger on it, you know, when I describe it. When I try to describe it, to describe the emotions and the way I felt, you know, it's just disappointing. And the way they lost, you know, they were up 14 with 6, 7, 8 minutes left in the game. They were up 9 with 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes left in the game. They were up 6 with 34 seconds left in the game, something to that effect. There's really no excuse as to why they lost that game. You know, you can sit and make excuses all day long, but at the end of the day, they just didn't execute down the stretch. They couldn't inbound the ball properly, couldn't make their free throws, turned the ball over when they shouldn't have been turning the ball over. You know, I don't know, man. It's other than disappointing, I don't know what else to call it. You know, the team was better than that, but you got to tip your hat to Houston. Houston did what they were supposed to do to win that ball game, even though Duke was in control of that game for a good 45 to 47 minutes of that game. Houston did not quit. And when I say they did not quit, I mean the score was 66-61 when the player for Houston, can't remember his name off the top of my head, but Duke was trying to inbound the ball. He hits the ball out of his hands, and a technical foul is called. Concanello goes to the free throw line, hits the free throw. Duke goes up 67-61. Probably about a minute 15 left in the game, something to that effect. At that point, Duke should have, would have, could have. I don't know. At that point, the game should have been over, period. Should have been over. And again, you got to give a lot of credit to Houston for not giving up in that scenario. A lot of teams would have folded in that moment when that dude got that technical. But Houston did not. If anything, they rallied behind that. Because after the technical free throw was made by Concanello, Houston, I believe, forced a turnover or Duke got a shot off and Houston got the rebound. Either way it goes, Duke got 1 point out of that possession off the technical free throw. They were not able to capitalize on scoring after the technical free throw. And ultimately, I think that hurt them and might have cost them the ball game. You know, folks are going to point out to the referee missing that call on Cooper Flag about the rebound. At the end of the day, Houston ended up with the ball on that play. So even if they wouldn't have called a foul on that play, there's no guarantee that Duke would have gotten the ball and scored in that situation. So we can sit and say the referees made a horrible call in that game. It didn't affect the outcome of the game in my mind because, like I said, Duke failed to execute down the stretch. You cannot be shooting 68% from the free throw line as a guard. That just can't happen. Anybody who's been a Duke fan for as long as I've been knows that when it comes to Duke losing in these moments like this, it's always because they have guys who couldn't hit their free throws. In 2018, when you had Zion Williamson, RJ Barrett, and Cam Reddish on the team, and Duke made it to the Elite Eight against Michigan State, what happened in that game? They couldn't hit free throws. They lost the game. It just goes to show it doesn't matter how talented you are. It doesn't matter how good of a coach you have. If you don't hit free throws, you're not going to win the game. If you don't protect the ball, you're not going to win the game. And I know that a lot of people are celebrating in this moment of Duke's misery. And I ain't mad at that. I get it. Everybody hates Duke. Duke is the most hated college basketball program in all of college basketball. It's cool to dunk on Duke. I ain't even mad at that. Go for what you know. You need to hit up my phone, hit up my comment section, talk a little trash. That makes you feel better. Go for it. I ain't mad at it. But the point I'm trying to make is that this happens to everybody. But for me, as a Duke fan, expectations are expectations. When you play basketball at Duke, there are expectations. There's always going to be expectations to go to the Final Four, to win the national championship, to be truly the best team in the land. And so many times in the past, Duke has had what I've considered or seen to be either the most talented team in college basketball or the best team in college basketball and failed to get it done. And for whatever reason, man, it just seems like it's happening way too often. I will not ignore the patterns that are prevalent when it comes to Jon Scheyer's coaching. And I'm not going to get into the nickname that I have for him. I'm not going to pile on Jon Scheyer today. That's not what I'm going to do. It might come at a later date, but not today. Today is not that day. Today is a day of mourning, so to say, because what happened last night shouldn't have happened. I still can't figure out where it went wrong, other than the fact that, again, Houston just seemed to want it more at the end. We've seen this in the past where Duke teams get a big lead and play the slow down game and try to run clock and whatnot. And I'm not going to say they did that last night. They kept playing the game the way they were supposed to play the game. So I say it's tough to put my finger on because the only complaints I have is how they finished that game. They played a great game otherwise. They had a nice 6-point, 10-point cushion, a nice 6-point, 10-point lead, and a nice cushion on Houston for pretty much the whole ball game. It was just at the very end of the game when Houston decided to put full court pressure on the ball and deny the inbounds passes coming in that Duke just absolutely shit the bed like an old man who can't control his bowels. I mean, it's the best way to say it. Because that's what they did. They shit the bed. Whew. I don't know. The more I talk about it, the more it gets, I don't know, just disappointing. But, it's going to be what it's going to be. Like I said, I'm not going to pile on Jon Scheyer. I'm going to keep it moving. I still got love for Duke basketball. I cannot wait to see how Cooper Flagg does in the NBA. And speaking of Cooper Flagg, so Duke had a total of 4 losses this year. I did not get to watch the Clemson game. I did watch the Kentucky game. I did watch the Kansas game. And, of course, I watched the Houston game. Clemson game, I really didn't get to watch a lot of. I really can't remember what was going on, but I really can't speak on what happened in that game. But in the Kentucky game and the Kansas game, both those games, including the Houston game now, all these games had a situation where Cooper Flagg was going to be asked to carry the team in a late game clutch situation. And that's a lot to put on a kid of his age, I guess, so to say, because every time you watch Duke play, they made a point to remind us that Cooper Flagg was a reclassified 17 who turned 18-year-old during the season and that he was a young kid. And let's be real. Cooper Flagg is one of the best freshmen we've seen come along in a long time. I saw a tweet last night that said the numbers that Cooper Flagg put up haven't been put up by a freshman since Larry Bird in 1979. So Cooper Flagg is definitely on that path to being a generational talent. So this is not me saying Cooper Flagg is a liability in the clutch. All I'm saying is that when you look at the Kentucky game, the Kansas game, and now the Houston game, there were 3 moments where Cooper Flagg had an opportunity to deliver in the clutch, and he came up a little short. And I think that as he becomes a more experienced ball player. He's going to learn from that. He's going to grow from that and become even better. There's folks saying, is Cooper Flag going to come back to Duke, whatever. I don't see it. Me personally, as a basketball fan, I kind of hope he goes to the San Antonio Spurs. I'd like to see them get the number 1 pick because watching Cooper and Wemby play together could be something else. They also got De'Aaron Fox, Stephon Castle, Devin Vassell. They have a lot of talent on that team. And you give them somebody like Cooper Flag on that team, and San Antonio is going to be good for a long time. And quite honestly, as a fan of basketball, I'm here for it. So while, you're going to see folks piling on Cooper Flag for not coming up in the clutch and failing to perform when it matters, you're not going to get that from me because Cooper Flag provided Duke basketball with a ton of great memories. He's been a memorable freshman, one of the best freshmen we've seen in a long time at Duke. And despite the inability for him to perform in the clutch, I ain't mad at him. And while we're saying not performing in the clutch, Cooper Flag scored 11 of Duke's last 15 points last night. So if that's not clutch, I don't know what it is. Like I said, people are going to look to that last shot that he missed and say, Cooper Flag ain't clutch. And, well, I just have a different version of clutch. You can't make every shot, can't be perfect. And quite honestly, he never should have been in that situation in the first place. And I'm not here to cast blame just yet. I'm not here to point fingers and say, you should have did this and you should have did that. Well, other than Tyrese Proctor making his free throws. And that's another question. How are people missing free throws in college basketball and professional basketball? How are they missing free throws? How is this not something that you were not 90% good at this point? I understand that the free throw is not an easy shot. I understand it's 15 foot away from the goal, whatever. But in the game of basketball, free throws are so important that you should never be a liability to your team when it comes to shooting free throws in any basketball game. 68% from a guard? That's just not good, man. That's not good at all. And for somebody who can shoot the three as good as he does, it really doesn't make any sense that he couldn't hit free throws. But that's neither here nor there. That's just me ranting, me being upset about some of the basic things that bother me when it comes to basketball and college basketball, professional basketball. I don't understand it. I've never understood it, and I never will understand it. How are you at that level of basketball and still unable to hit free throws at an 80 to 85% clip? If you can't do that, that tells me you're not practicing your free throws enough, or when you do practice your free throws, you're not focusing enough. To me, it just seems that simple. But what do I know? I'm just a mechanic. But anyway, shout out once again to the Houston Cougars for showing the desire to not lose, as a competitor. I can't help but appreciate that. Like I said, it's tip of the cap to the Houston Cougars. Kelvin Sampson, congratulations on making the championship game. Hope you can get it done. It's going to be a tough task for you, but it should be a good game between Florida and Houston. Houston is an incredible defensive team, one of the best three-point shooting teams in college basketball. And Florida, like I said, they have Walter Clayton. So, it should be a pretty good game. Whether folks, I know folks saying they ain't going to watch it, this, that, and the other. Those are mainly Duke fans. I'm sure I'll tune in and check it out and see what's going on. I'm sure I'll have to relive the moments of Saturday evening of Duke choking away that basketball game, as that'll live on in infamy. But, it's going to be what it's going to be. Good season, Duke. Thank you for the memories. Thank you for the memories, Cooper Flag, Concanupple. I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys do at the next level. And John Shire, back to the drawing board, man. Bring in another number 1 recruiting class, and let's see what you can do with these boys coming up next year. But till then, that's all I got for Duke basketball in 2025. You couldn't get it done, boys, but, it's going to be what it's going to be. Go Duke. Now, I do want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the NBA a little bit. I do want to remind y'all that next week, my episode with my NBA expert will be released to you. My playoff preview on the NBA playoffs will be coming up soon to you next week. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about the NBA. We're entering the last week of the regular season for the NBA, and the seedings in the Western Conference is far from being resolved. So I expect this to be an intense week of basketball. The Clippers are coming on at the right time. The Houston Rockets are playing really good. OKC has been a machine that has been unable to be stopped. The Lakers, last I saw, they were the 3 seed, but one day they play good, the next day they don't. If they're not careful, they can end up as an 8 seed instead of 3 seed, as there's only 2 games that separate the 3 seed from the 8 seed in the Western Conference. So this should be a pretty exciting week to finish the NBA regular season and whatnot. But in this final week of the regular season, I guess we'll see if anybody else can manage to get fined for doing a gun gesture after making a 3-point shot or hitting a shot over opponent, or we find out if that's just reserved for Ja Morant. it makes me a little uncomfortable the way the NBA is treating Ja Morant when it comes to gun gestures on the court, simply because he is being persecuted for things of his past that happened off the court. On the court, we're really gonna do this about the gun gestures with Ja Morant when he's not the only one who does these gestures. You know, there's pictures floating around the internet of Mikal Bridges, Tyrese Maxey, LeBron James, Dalton Connect. So many folks out here doing the gun gesture. And when Ja Morant does it, he gets fined. When everybody else does it, nothing happens. So to me, that sends a mixed message regarding the NBA when it comes to how they want to combat these gun gesture celebrations that have been done repeatedly in the NBA throughout the year. Why it became a problem all of a sudden when Ja Morant did it is just confusing to me. Now, I understand his past. I understand that he has past incidents where involving guns on social media where he was suspended by the NBA. I understand that the NBA has a reputation and an image to uphold. I understand that. And I also understand that they have the ability to dole out the punishment any way they see fit when it comes to the players and how they protect their image. I get that. Get that totally. And I ain't even gonna lie. I don't have a problem with that. The only thing I have a problem with is Ja Morant being fined for doing the same gun gesture that many, many other players do. All I'm asking is to keep it fair and dole the punishment out fairly and appropriately across the board. I don't think that's asking too much. And I can understand the angst that a lot of people feel when it comes to how the NBA has treated Ja Morant in this situation, because, again, it just doesn't seem to make any sense to punish one and not punish all. Now, if they sent out a blanket warning to all the teams saying, hey, look, we're not going to tolerate this any longer, I get it. But at the same time, you still need to punish more than just Ja Morant. You know, Ja Morant got the warning and he went out and did it again, so he got fined. I get that. You said don't do it, and he did it, so you fine him. I get it. Again, my only point is he should not be the only one. So if this is something the NBA is going to do going forward, I hope that they've done a better job of communicating with all the teams to make sure that this isn't just a Ja Morant issue, but that it's an NBA issue. And speaking of the gun gestures and whatnot, I just for that, I don't understand why that celebration is such a bad thing, especially when we're in a country that, as Jay Williams put it on Twitter, we live in a country where we glorify gun use and we glorify guns. So, you know, guns are, what did you say? Guns are used in films, music, marketing. The list goes on as to what guns are, how they're marketed, and how they're displayed in public perception. So when you look at how the NBA is acting, I guess, towards these gun gesture celebrations, only by one person, mind you, it just makes you wonder what the root cause of all of it is. A whole lot of time talking about Ja Morant and the NBA in that particular situation, but I did want to speak on it a little bit because, again, like I said, the whole scenario was making me a little uncomfortable. And as a result, I don't want to see this be a situation where Ja Morant is no longer allowed to play in the NBA because of guns. When I don't know, it just seems like a weird situation to me. Right now, it's hard for me to put it in words exactly what I'm trying to say. I don't know. It's just a weird situation, and I hate to see it happening. And hopefully, going forward, Ja Morant will comply. Hopefully, Ja Morant will show a little bit more maturity, because again, this is not a situation where Ja Morant is completely innocent. Because again, like I said, I understand why they're treating him the way they're treating him. I just don't agree with it and don't really like it. I think there's better ways to handle this situation without singling him out and making him the poster boy for bad behavior in the NBA, especially when you look at a lot of the other things that have embarrassed the NBA or are currently embarrassing the NBA. The energy that they choose to put on Ja Morant is something that I feel is wasteful. And hopefully they will fix that going forward. But anyway, enough of the Ja Morant and NBA whatnot. We got the playoffs coming up. Hopefully, again, like I mentioned earlier, hopefully that'll, turn that news cycle away from the gun gestures and whatnot. We can get to what really matters in the NBA, and that's crowning a world champion, seeing who's going to be the best of the best, which cream is going to rise to the top. And like I said, just another reminder, playoff preview episode coming up next week with my NBA expert. So make sure you tune in for that. Now, last thing I want to touch on before I get out of here is the recent trademark opposition filed by Lamar Jackson against Dale Earnhardt Jr. over the stylized font of the number 8 that Dale Earnhardt Jr. was using for his junior motorsports team in the NASCAR Xfinity Series and whatnot. So without really getting into too much of that, long story short, Lamar Jackson filed a trademark opposition to the stylized font that Dale Earnhardt Jr. was using for his junior motorsports team. A couple of hours later, Junior Motorsports decided that they were going to switch that number 8 to the one that he made famous when he used to drive for DEI back in the day. So at this point, Dale Jr. is taking the high road and switching the number as to so not create confusion on the number 8s or the number 8s that they're using. Long story short, that's basically what's going on. Dale Jr. took the high road. The conversation piece that I have is seeing this take place and seeing a lot of the posts on NASCAR media websites on social media. Man, when I say the Dale Earnhardt Jr. fans went nuts, I mean they went nuts. But we're talking about one of the most rabid and loyal fan bases in all of sports. You know, I can't remember off the top of my head when Dale Earnhardt Jr. quit racing. It's been about 4 or 5 years, something to that effect. When he quit regularly racing, my man got a concussion, and he was never really the same after that. He got a concussion, I believe it was in the Pontiac Le Mans or some shit like that, and he was just never the same after that. And eventually, he ended up having to step away from racing as a result. But Dale Earnhardt Jr. was by far the most popular driver in NASCAR for a very, very long time. And like I said, when I say he's got a loyal and rabid fan base, he has a loyal and rabid fan base. And when I say Lamar Jackson's name is now mud in all NASCAR circles, I mean Lamar Jackson's name is mud in all NASCAR circles. So I spent some time on, cruising the websites on social media, looking at some of the things people were saying. Some folks got out of line, which is to be expected, especially in the NASCAR circle. But for the most part, one of the things I noticed was there were people who clearly did not know who Lamar Jackson was. And I hate to say that blew my mind, but I don't know how you can be a fan of sports and not know who Lamar Jackson is. Because we're talking about probably arguably one of the most popular players in the NFL. I ain't going to say he's the face of the NFL because he's really not the face of the NFL. Whether or not he should be or should not be is a whole other discussion that we could probably have at a later date. The point I'm trying to make is, even though these people in the NASCAR circles didn't know who Lamar Jackson was, I would love to know who is the more popular number 8 in 2025, Lamar Jackson or Dale Earnhardt Jr. Because I had that conversation with a couple of people, and there were people who were telling me Americans will identify the number 8 or recognize and apply the number 8 with Dale Earnhardt Jr. more than they would apply with Lamar Jackson. And I just have a hard time believing that. People were saying things like outside of Baltimore, nobody would know who Lamar Jackson is. And I'm like, how is that a valid thought? How is that even possible? That doesn't make any sense. For one, you go to Louisville, Kentucky, and I guarantee that Lamar Jackson's number 8. Lamar Jackson is number 8 is going to be more popular than Dale Earnhardt Jr. at number 8 in Louisville, Kentucky. You go to Miami, Florida. Lamar Jackson's number 8 is going to be more popular than Dale Earnhardt Jr. in Miami, Florida. So that being said, 127 million people watched the Super Bowl this year. 6 million people watched Daytona 500 this year. I'm thinking there's a lot more people who know who Lamar Jackson is and can recognize that number 8 with Lamar Jackson more so than Dale Earnhardt Jr., considering that when you look at who's watching football compared to who's watching NASCAR, and you look at the fact that Dale Earnhardt Jr. hasn't raced in NASCAR in 4 or 5 years, I don't know. It's kind of hard for me to believe that Dale Earnhardt Jr. is the more popular number 8. But I could be wrong. What do I know? Like I said before, I'm just a mechanic. So what do I really know? But I do question that, and I do wonder exactly who is the more popular number 8. Now, I wish we could have some kind of scientific poll so we could figure out who is that more popular number 8, because we're never really going to have it. It's just going to be a debate between fans of both number 8s and whatnot. So, it's going to be what it's going to be. But at the end of the day, if I had to guess, I'm saying Lamar Jackson is going to be a little bit more popular than Dale Earnhardt Jr. when it comes to the number 8. And when Lamar Jackson wins that Super Bowl and switches to number 1, then he can file trademark oppositions to all the number 1s who used number 1 back in the day. It's going to be what it's going to be. But at the end of the day, I'm always going to roll with Lamar. So, hey, Lamar Jackson to me, the more popular number 8. But anyway, that's probably all I got for this week's show. I apologize for my energy being down a little bit because, I still got last night on my brain. I ain't even going to lie. Still got last night on my brain. It's a tough loss, like I said. If you'd have seen me in 2002 compared to now, you would see some similarities. Like I said, 2002 Duke losing was a lot worse, but this is pretty bad. This is a pretty bad loss. And the more I think on it, the more I dwell on it, the worse it gets. But before I go, I do want to give a quick shout out to Alex Ovechkin. I'm not a big hockey guy, but I do know who the great one, Wayne Gretzky, is. Growing up as a kid, Wayne Gretzky was the man when it came to hockey. He was the hockey version of Michael Jordan. So he was the great one, the greatest hockey player ever, by what many people say. And I'm not one to argue that because, like I said, I'm not a hockey guy. But Alex Ovechkin, he tied Wayne Gretzky's record the other night with 894 goals in the NHL. And he's one goal away from becoming the all-time leading scorer in the NHL. And in my mind, he deserves a shout out for that because that's a record that many people thought would never be broken. And for him to tie that record and to be on the verge of breaking that record, we're watching history in the making. And regardless of where you stand, regardless of how you feel about any athlete, any team, any sport, anything that's going on, I always feel like you should treasure the opportunity to watch history being made. Again, I'm not a hockey guy. I'm probably not going to be watching it, but this is something that we should all appreciate as sports fans, watching history being made. Hey, shout out to Alex Ovechkin for scoring 894 goals, tying the great Wayne Gretzky in that accomplishment. And like I said, hey, you a bad man. And Alex Ovechkin, popular number 8. So, maybe Lamar sue him for trademark opposition as well. And they can fight and see who the more popular number 8 is going to be in that aspect as well. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, again, hey, tip of the cap to the Houston Cougars. You did what you were supposed to do. No, like I said, I'm not going to harp on what I call John Shire, but there's patterns. There's definitely patterns. But anyway, I'm going to get on off of here. Y'all have a good one. Y'all be easy. Peace.